Hey everyone, good afternoon. Happy Wednesday Wisdom. I am here with another episode of Trap Chat Live. Very excited to have my guest today, Mr. Mark Anthony Dyson, the voice of the voice of job seekers, also a husband, father, member of Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated. What else? Founder, blogger, podcast host, writer, and honestly, my friend, and one of the most gracious and collaborative folks that I have met here in the talent acquisition, career coaching, HR space. So I am very happy to have you here, Mark. If you want to give a little bit more academic introduction of yourself, please do so.
There is no academic introduction for me. I leave all the academics to my oldest son.
Okay.
He's the boy wonder of the family. But me, I'm just lucky to be around here and have a couple of thoughts to share. So here we are.
All right. Well, let's jump into it because,
Mhm.
I don't like to hold folks long. I like to get in, give them the information, and then give them back the rest of their day. So,
Mhm.
once again, those of us who work in the hiring space are being subjected to some decisions that I'm guessing are being made without a lot of guidance and a lot of thought. We'll
Yeah,
say
yeah.
seems like every
They're the
day.
kids. They're the kids that hide behind the saws when
Yeah.
in that commercial where the guy's chasing them supposedly, and they say, "Well, let's get in the running car," and they don't get in the running car. Instead, they go right to where the guy with the saw is hanging out, and he's even going, "Oh gosh, what's going on?" That's
Right.
exactly what it looks like.
Yeah, so a lot of layoffs. But in addition to
Hmm.
that, a lot of bad behavior. So
Hmm.
let's start with the layoffs, and then we'll get into Voldemort's behavior. So
Okay. Okay.
I've been doing this a long time. I know you've been doing this a little bit longer than me, but it seems like there are usually a round of layoffs that happened at the end of the year, specifically
Mm.
because folks want to get their bonuses. They want to tell their stakeholders or their board members, their investors that they made X amount of money, and the way to do that a lot of times is to cut staff. But
Hmm.
I do think that this time it's a little bit different because these companies, especially the larger ones, like your Amazons, your Metas, um, I've seen, Netflix laid a bunch of people off. What was it, in the summertime, I believe? Um, you've
Hmm.
got Intel, Snap, like just about every tech company you can think of has been laying folks off. Um, but it's been a lot more. So, like June was the end of a quarter. So, or the beginning of one. So, we're talking almost 30,000 people laid off in the tech
Hmm.
industry in June. But October, 22,000, over 22,000. November, so far, you know, over 26,000. Like, this isn't normal, right?
Uh, I'm afraid it's not uncommon though, even though it's not normal. And yet, some companies they're more messier than others.
Hmm.
But there is a way to help people land. For instance, Facebook. I don't see all the Facebook people going, doggone it, and saying all these things about their CEO. Well, in case you didn't know, that's because Facebook decided, let's try to do this in a civilized way, and let's try to give people or to land softly. So I don't know if you've seen what they've been doing or how they do it, but I wrote down what they were getting. And I said,
Okay.
boy,
Yeah,
this is
please
kind of
share it.
fun.
Please share it.
Okay. Facebook employees, Meta,
Hmm.
16 weeks of severance,
Oh,
two more weeks for every year of service, pay for their unused paid time off, and receive by November 15th, the retired stock unit vesting,
Okay. There are
health,
issues.
health,
Yes.
ins- health insurance for covered for the next 6 months,
Now that's
career
important.
tran- career transition services
Okay.
for those who are here in the U.S. on visas. This is important. The company plans to provide guidance and help. Some of it is a wait and see. Some of it's pretty straightforward.
Right.
And they did it in such a way where it wasn't such a volatile,
I can
climate.
appreciate that. But what I will say, and this might be a bias coming from, obviously because of my profession, but the majority of the 11,000 Meta folks were not tech workers. They were in recruiting because they're about to run into a hiring freeze. Um,
Mm,
and I have seen that before, like, laying off the HR people, laying off the recruiters, who are a lot of times already overburdened, already overtaxed. And then the ones that remain are the ones who, they have even more work than they did before. And, that leads
mhm,
to burnout, to be quite frank, especially when you're already under resourced, and a lot of these companies are, in terms of right sizing their departments, like how many coordinators to recruiters, to, like how many HR people to recruiters, those type of things matter. And I think that in times like these, if you have to cut headcount, not because there's different reasons for layoffs. We know this, right? Sometimes it's headcount,
mhm.
sometimes it's a money thing, sometimes it's a combination of both. But
Yeah, and as employees, though, you do still have a responsibility and to act like an adult to some great
yeah.
degree, and you have to be that way online. And understand, just because you leave the company and you don't like their policies doesn't mean you still should start to vent online, because it walks a very fine line, because for some companies you do have a you signed that little disclosure deal not to
Hmm.
disclose and all that. And under certain layoff guides, they can look at it as you saying something defamatory against the company, and
Right.
if should you put it out there in the whole social world, people who engage with that particular content could be used as witnesses. So you've got to be kind of careful in what you say. And sometimes, even though you may not agree and it may not have been the best environment, you still have to be careful in what you put out there, because also other companies are looking at that and may see your activity and say, well, you know, that could happen to any company now. We get that part.
Right.
In between the recessions of the last 15 years, out of all of those, employers can look at your timeline and your social interactions and see how you're going to act if it should happen to, or should I say, when it happens to them too. So all that to say is, it could be kind of tough out there, but to don't make it tougher for yourself as a job seeker when you become one, that there should be some hurdles that you'll need to jump, and that may be one of them.
Okay. So you see, there's a question here from Philadelphia. Hey, Maurice. He wants to know: is are these layoffs? Is that a result of not only the economy but jobs turning into automated call centers?
That is a great question, and that is one of mystery. There are companies that are doing or letting go people in preparation or in view of a recession is coming, or a few may even say that a recession is here, based on what they consider a recession is, because everybody doesn't see recession the same way that anybody else does. Some industries look at it as an opportunity, others are going to look at it, well, we better cut back. And tech companies have been copycat companies pretty much. What
Mhm.
one does, all the other ones tend to follow. So when what bunch of them make an announcement saying we see it coming, so these other companies, maybe we should cut back too, and they end up doing the same thing if they feel like it's going to be a hurdle that they will have a harder time to climb over. And like you said, all that thing about the board of advisors and just having overhired, overreach because other companies were overreaching too in hiring. We had the situation at hand, not knowing exactly what kind of recession is going to hit yet at this particular time. In other recessions, housing markets were affected.
Hmm.
The last one we had back in 2020, the hotel and other industries like that were affected.
Right.
And to some degree, the housing market is affected for some, but not for others. So we can argue how it's all going to manifest itself. But all in all, I think it is, yeah, people who see the economy, they start to count their pennies, and it makes it really difficult for everybody to go through when everybody has to go through it.
Okay. So I hear that, but again, like we're talking about companies that saw record profits, like extreme, like
But lost record money. I mean, I'm not excusing companies that do it, but Facebook, Meta,
mhm,
whatever you want to call it,
yeah.
lost billions and billions and billions of dollars. So they reported.
Okay.
Now, we don't know if it was just sitting there in the bank collecting interest, or if it was actually a functional billions and billions of dollars that took them away from the operations of, whatever they're considering. Nobody's not looking into it right now. Right now, we'll hold that right there. But all in all, they're looking at those billions of dollars, something that is going to cause um, collateral damage.
Okay. All right. I'm going to let that part go because I do appreciate you bringing the numbers, like bringing the facts, especially on when it comes to how Meta is, like you said, being very. They're doing a layoff, I believe, in the right way. But let's stay with your comment about not making about a job. Someone is you're going to potentially be a job seeker at some point, whether
Hmm.
by choice or by someone else choosing for you.
Hmm.
So to say, don't make it tougher for yourself when you become a job seeker.
Hmm.
Let's stay there for just a bit.
Okay.
Now, we know, like you said, you don't want to be posting things online that are negative. You don't want to be doing X, Y, and Z.
Hmm.
But in some ways, do you think that there's a way to give balanced reviews, including the negativity, that doesn't put a bad mark on your record, so to speak, or doesn't make you look like a someone who's going to go into the applicant tracking system as a do not hire?
Yes.
Okay.
Lord knows you had to mention applicant tracking systems, and I hope all of you guys who are writing resumes will just kind of hold on for a moment, because I know you all want to jump in there how you can write to beat the ATS. We're
We don't
not
talk.
here for that kind
Look,
of
look,
part.
look.
We're not. You
Beating the
mentioned it. I'm just
ATS
saying.
is
I'm
Bruno
just.
on
I'm just
in Track
saying.
Chat
I'm
Live.
just saying this
We
is
don't
not that
talk
kind of
about no
party.
such thing as beating the ATS. Stop it.
We're saying this is not that kind of party.
No.
but the issue is how do you become a viable candidate at this
Yes.
particular time, and how you can stand out. One of the things is social, and what I mean is, and I mean, for a writer like me, I love the drama of people saying things bad about companies, so I could
Yeah.
go back and stir up trouble with it. I love it. It's like gossip,
That's why you're
you,
friends with
you
me.
yeah, that's why I'm friends with you. I
Yeah.
love that part of it,
Yeah.
but realistically, you have to think, how would this fare in looking at you? At least maybe give it a little bit more time than to come
Okay.
out right away and grind the axe, because that's what employers are going to begin to look at. Now, people can save tweets, they can photograph it, so you think you can delete it later and all that. You got to understand, what you put out there could be saved forever.
Right.
So you've got to think about what that's going to look like later on. I think there are ways that you can do it, and I think you don't you have to necessarily do it on doorway, you could say things without saying that to besmirch the company that you used to work for.
Mhm.
And saying it, you could say in a general way, like a lot of people do. People can get the point and say, employers are treating people this way. And if you know someone really well, then you can link them to the company or not. But all in all, I think a lot of us talk about our collective experiences, which where there is a pattern of behavior that can be called out, and we can put the blames where it all is. And thanks for agreeing, Maurice, in that sense. But I think when you get to where you're doing it right after, and while you're right after something happens and your feelings are still there, I think there's a possibility that you can end up in a bad place or make it a little bit tougher for you, because other companies are looking at that, and they're going to look at your timeline, what you've said recently, and they're going to look at what have you done for me lately. And it's better to put how you can market yourself as a better candidate and
Mm.
doing the job that you're going to be targeting, than to carry around those baggages that you're still hold hot in your heart. And I think there's the thing ways that you stand out before that make you qualified, those need to stand out even more. So you think about your industry at large, think about the ideas that you bring to the industry, or the ways that you bring more functionality to the position that you're in. Make that the market, make that visible in a way that people see that you care more about advancing the industry at large than you do about what happened at one place. We have to be reasonable whenever we're approaching times when people are making fashion statements out of their experiences with a
Ooh, I
company that
like
treated
that.
them. But it's true.
Yeah.
We wear it on, people wear it on their sleeves, they wear it on their hearts, and that's the sexy thing to do. It gets you 1,000 likes, it gets you a bunch of retweets, it gets you repostings like mad. But in the long term, that truly doesn't. You don't want that to be the banner you want to hang your reputation and your personal brand on in the long run. You want to hang it on things that where people can still hire you, and hire you quicker than could you did the last time, perhaps, because you did approach it in a very positive manner. You got to keep your head in these situations, and the real reality is people do have hard times getting
Yeah.
back, just like with the great reset, and that whole the great resignation thing, which has become an American standard now, I
Mm.
think, to where we can say that the great resignation is over by that way, meaning that it's not a trend anymore. It has always been a viable job search strategy to go forward. But I think all in all, Maurice's point about how I found people want to speak their truth without thinking for the long term outcome, that is generally true.
Yeah.
But again, I can't say it enough. It's going to affect you in some kind of way, because you never know who's looking.
Yeah.
Even if they don't make themselves known to you, they're looking as, we would hire this person, but they're going to say things about it. Layoffs are inevitable. That's part of our culture. That's the way of life.
Mhm.
Being fired for no reason, that's going to be the way of our life. As long as we have states that are in the at will status, that's going to happen. You still got to act accordingly in a way that you're going to be a marketable piece the day after you get laid off or you're separated from the company.
Okay. So I was thinking about something as you were talking, because I did actually kind of favor your side. Because at first I was like, I think it's a generational thing. Like my parents are boomers, and the way that I approach work is different than them as a Gen Xer, which is
I'm a
different.
boomer, so I'm a boomer, so you better be careful.
You're a young boomer though. You're a young boomer though. Just like
But
I'm a old,
okay,
well, I'm a young Gen Xer actually, and you're a young boomer. So, and then you have like the millennials, Gen Z. You have a bunch of people in the workforce right now who are all approaching things from different through different lenses, and so I was like, well, it works for them, like you said, wearing it on your sleeve sometimes, you know, that gets you attention at a minimum. And what did they say? Like, there's no such thing as bad press. It's you know, it, the more people say your name, the more things are going to happen. But I started to think a little bit about that show that used to come on cable, Survivor's Remorse, you know,
Mm,
and having been someone who has been a part of mass layoffs from different points, being a
mhm,
survivor a lot, but also being a part of the group of people who were executing those things, who were making those decisions, working off of spreadsheets and, trying to, like I said, strategically right size things and all of that has put me like I knew that there were times, and again, being in the job you're in where first you're the first person that people see when
mm,
they're coming to the company. You're an attraction tool, and having that weight on you sometimes became an issue. And if I'm going to be honest, when there were layoffs, especially when we knew they were coming up, because we always knew first, recruiting,
mhm,
HR, we knew when layoffs were coming up because we had to start like, hey, kind of calm down on these offers, don't offer this much, or let's put a stop to this. And then we knew it was coming up. That made the people who were left, the survivors, they start looking too, you know
mhm, mhm.
so
Yeah.
do you have any advice for someone who is in a situation like I said, like they weren't affected by the layoff, but meaning they weren't one of the people who were laid off, but they were still affected, and now that's their motivation to start their job search. What advice do you have for those folks?
Well, I think one, you should listen to the ground that you're on and listen for start paying attention. And I'm not saying go out of your way, start paying attention to some of the language. You can see some of the signs.
Okay.
Budget cuts is one. That's you can see that from HR. If you're a recruiter and they tell you not to don't offer the house, don't play with so much with the house money,
Yep.
then you can start say, well, maybe I need to start considering my options. Which, by the way, you know what I always say: job search should be a lifestyle. And the three things that you always should stay in tie is your network. You should keep in line with your professional development, and also keep your options open. And if you're involved in your industry, in other associations that are aligned with your profession, you hear about other openings and you start to always consider those as an option, as a way to land a little bit more softly than if you found out today and didn't have a layoff. So those kind of things are going to be really important to consider. So that way, again, the time will be a lot shorter for layoffs. There's nothing you do to prevent it, but you should definitely start looking at other opportunities. Secondly, you should start getting your packets together and start looking at your handbooks and your manuals and whatever they have, and look at to see what's going to happen with your benefits, and what benefits you need to start to build the extra shelter for, and others that you may need to compensate for financially. It doesn't hurt to hire somebody who's a financial advisor in those
Oh.
particular instances, so that you can have your finances in order somewhat, even if it's just a one off, if that's possible with all the CFPs I know, to have a one off session to where what you should do and how you should do your money is going to be a key. There are times when you're going to need to tap into your network, and that's the kind of thing you can start connecting with other people specifically about and say, hey, I see layoffs coming. Is there a bridge to somewhere as opposed to nowhere?
Hmm.
And consider that aspect of it. And three, look at how what your trajectory is, if that's possible, in the sense that how marketable are you to go out as is right now, the career
Mm.
development piece, in the sense that you need to start connecting. One thing about those who are in tech, you have a bunch of tech conferences that you connect to. Is good to invest in those and go to those. Afrotech, I think, is one of the most recent ones that just kind of started and ended recently, or might
Yeah, it was,
still
I
be
think
going
it's still
on. I
going
forgot.
on. Yeah.
Yeah, so you want to, if you missed the conference, get those available tapes, not tapes. I call them tapes. I'm so old, but get try to get the transcripts and, of course, whatever you can get of the broadcast, and see if you can go ahead and make that transition to finding out what it's going to take for you to be more marketable.
Okay.
But having said that, when you got some stuff that's coming on, those are networking opportunities. If
Yeah.
anything, go for the networking. It is worth the price of admission. Having done conferences in recent years, is worth to go networking because you make those connections there and you make those connections for your life.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. All right, so we're at two, we're almost at the half an hour mark, and I want us to have a little bit. Uh-oh. Let's see. Sarah says she's having major Afrotech 2022 FOMO, seeing all the
Right.
shares.
I'm not even in tech industry, but I love it. But
Yeah.
I have written. If you look up, I wrote for a client on ripplematch.com. If you put in Ripple Match, Mark Anthony Dyson, you might
Okay.
be able to find that article where I wrote about the 10 conferences people of color can go to, and I mentioned several Black, Latino, Indian, lesbian. I'm sorry, LGBT conferences that you all can attend specifically and go to and hook up with, or at least you could start to join some of those communities where there are things that are going on. A lot of them do have LinkedIn pages you can get on, or Facebook pages, and start to connect with people before you get those conferences. That's really a great way to start connecting and start planning for next year as well. But you got to keep those three tenants and those irons hot
Yeah.
um, when you're in a job, because those are also the hardest to get going once you get laid off, because you go through those waves, those emotional waves, those doubts, those fears, the lack of faith. You start to even sometimes doubt your abilities, and that can happen to anyone.
Yeah.
That you want to be able to have a softer landing place for yourself.
Yeah, and there's going to be, so this is the last point that I'm going to make, because that is a
Hmm.
good point, and I think that's especially with folks that I talk to who are in the job market, because of a layoff, who felt, quote unquote unprepared, and a lot of times, a lot of layoffs, not necessarily the mass ones, but even some of them, they are not, they are a surprise, to the
Yeah.
general employee population. So but I also think like there has to be some time, to build your confidence back up, to start feeling, good about that. So
Hmm.
when you have something, do you think it'll be an adverse impact on those folks who, they have these packages and they're great, like that's great.
Hmm.
And then, at some point they're going to start looking for a job again, but then you've got employed people, and we're going to be honest, it's easier for employed people to get a job than it is for folks who are in between. It is.
I think it's changed slightly. That is not as bad as it used to be.
Okay.
2011, 2009 to 11, it was rough, and you had the employment bias that was right there front and center.
Oh, you still
And
got
in fact,
employment bias.
you still got employment bias, but employers are much more understanding with the pandemic recession that happened,
Hmm.
since that's still so close and fresh in memory, that it won't be as bad for a lot of people. However, there are companies, and you can dig deep into Twitter like I do. I have Hootsuite and I have all these Windows open keywords and things like that. There are the dopies who still think that, oh, it's going to be so bad for you, and it's gloom and doom, and don't pay attention to those people. The most important thing is, if you can get a referral, if you can get one, that increases your chances.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily land you in the right spot, but if you can get several referrals, if you can get into several conversations, you may have to be as bold as, and I do recommend this, is to start to call some of the C suite, and start, if you're connected to some of them, they will at least pass you down to someone
True.
and somebody of relevance. And you got to tread some of those conversations lightly because they could also cut you off forever
Yeah.
to any access at all. But having said that, you got to start doing some bold things. And one of my colleagues and friends, Aaron Kennedy, told me years ago that each job search, you should do at least something a little bit bold in meeting a person, creating an opportunity, not so much making a show out of yourself, but at least drawing some kind of attention that somebody says, he was bold enough to do that because for some reason, is somebody in power is looking at it looks at something that somebody did say, oh, that was kind of bold. Let me see what that person's all about because the job search is kind of an audacious sport as well because you're willing to go out there and make yourself known in a way that people aren't doing these days. And you just got to find those sweet spots and start doing them, as well as doing the normal things. Yeah, I wouldn't say spend so much time on your resume. I do say spend more time talking to people and meeting people and connecting with them in a way. Also, be helpful to other job seekers.
Yes. I
don't
like
be
that.
don't be selfish in thinking that your opportunity is going to be taken away because giving the opportunity also creates an opportunity that I see time and time and time again. So be sure that you're also, and I like what Josh Rock says, is that you collaborate with other people. Even if you have been laid off yourself, if other people are winning, they're going to give you a little bit of boost too. So I think any advantage point you can get um, will work.
All right. And I do want to read Josh's uh, message here. When I've collaborated with mass layoff workers, I remind them it's less about their skills, performance, and more about the failure of the company. Keep rocking your career. I say that twice. Keep rocking your career. And
Mhm.
then last point is yours. Be helpful to other job seekers. Getting an opportunity creates an opportunity. I think that that is sound advice. And
Yeah,
don't be hoard. So, in other words, don't hoard jobs. Share
yeah,
them with
well,
your
yeah,
network,
well,
even if
well.
you're,
There's no
even the ones that
you,
aren't, that aren't,
you
you're not
can't hoard
interested in.
something you
Share them.
have. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, you can't hoard something you don't have. But you could definitely think that that you get more of a chance if you keep it to yourself.
yeah,
There might be a grain of sand truth to that. But I think the more that if you find somebody that really fits and you barely fit, move aside because again, that person can't possibly create an opportunity for you. Giving just does that. It comes back to you. And I see it time and time again. The more you give, the more you get back.
yes,
It's part of the natural universe of things, if I said
absolutely.
that right.
So, thinking about giving, Thanksgiving is next week for
Yes.
those who celebrate.
Mhm.
Uh, so we've been having we had a discussion on the last show. Hold on. So I want to read Josh's statement before I ask you this question. Amen. Get out from behind the resume building. Whew. We might have to have a whole show on this, Josh. Maybe next month. Get out
Yeah.
from behind the resume building and get to being with people, networking, and connecting. I have to read
Yeah.
that again.
Mhm.
Get out from behind the resume building and get to being with people, networking, and connecting.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
So, Thanksgiving next week, allegedly. And we were having a discussion, a little dust up. You know how my friends like to banter back and forth. We like to tussle a bit, but
Hmm.
in a sweet and
Simple
kind
way.
way. Yeah, in a sweet and
Yeah.
kind way. So we were having a pumpkin pie versus sweet potato pie discussion, and I think it's appropriate for Thanksgiving. Which one? Are you team pumpkin or team sweet potato?
I'm team sweet potato.
Okay.
Although, yeah, I think in both cases, there's so much sugar in both of them.
Oh
Golly.
man.
Pumpkin, I think there's much more of an attempt to to make it sweeter.
Uh-huh.
And I've had both,
Okay.
and I've had both, but Team Sweet Potato is more of a preference, and it's much more delicious if you have the right person making it.
Okay. Grits. Does sugar go on grits?
I lived in areas where it happened in both. I lived in Tampa, Florida. It was Team Sugar. When I came here to Chicago, it was a little bit of sugar, but also it was butter and salt as
Okay.
well. So I don't do either. I don't eat grits. Uh,
Oh,
I retired grits to its grave, like I retired rice to its grave for
so
a
when
lot
you
of different
did eat
reasons.
grits, what did you put on your grits? Sugar?
It
Did
was
you
it
put
was
did you
butter.
put
It
sugar on
was
your grits?
butter. I put butter and I put pepper
Okay.
and maybe a smidget of sea salt.
Okay.
Uh, and I had very little bit, but I also had to have bacon with it. Mix bacon with grits. And
Bacon.
that is a pure Southern thing. So I kind of
Yes, but aren't you from
cross
New York?
I'm originally from New York,
Yes.
but I went to school in Tampa, Florida,
Right.
and I moved to Michigan,
Yes.
where you didn't put anything on anything at all. That's a whole nother story.
Okay.
But when I came to Chicago South Side, people did all different things. It's because
Well, let's be honest.
if
If
you
you
were
if
a
you
lot of
live in Chicago, you're really
transplants,
from Mississippi. Like, let's
that's
just be honest.
arguably true. That's arguably true. Yes, it is. And
Yes.
you get a lot of those folks, but you get a lot of people who kind of detour and find their own way. So I've heard all kinds of things. I've heard honey on grits, which is very interesting. I know people looking, but there's a
Oh,
subset
no.
that you have some dark honey on grits. I'm not a fan of that at all.
John P.
But
Key said
yeah,
sugar don't go on grits. It's a whole song. Sugar don't go on
the,
grits.
yes, I don't like sugar with grits. I never had it. But there was always people around me who had it. So
Okay.
what do you say,
Well,
right?
from the comments, Team Sweet Potato wins. Sweet potato
Yeah,
for life. Sweet potato, sweet
yeah,
potato. No
yeah.
pumpkin votes. Sorry, y'all. But when you
Right.
go, when you, if you are in charge of dessert and you have a choice between pumpkin or sweet potato, pick up the sweet potato. Don't take your family a pumpkin pie. The end. All right.
Right.
So you and I did a fun show.
The 10
With
hip hop songs
yes.
for yeah, that which is coming up on the 29th. It's going to be
Okay.
in the podcast feed.
All right.
So it's
Great.
coming up on the 29th.
Okay. So we did a fun show about hip hop songs for your job
Uh-huh.
search, but I want
Uh-huh.
I always ask my guests, um, what is that song that say you're having that you're below the line this day and you need a pick me up, like what's that song that every time you turn it on, what's your go-to song to get you right?
Let's see. There's several. Uh, One lately, I've been listening to Rage Against the Machine, Guerrilla
Really?
Radio, Guerrilla Radio, in the name of Bulls on Parade, all of that pre 2000 Rage Against the Machine. I've been really digging. I listened to some of it on the workout,
Okay.
uh, along with LL Cool J's Rock the Bell Radio.
Okay.
But but the song that you had on one of your posters, "Treat Me Right," Chubb Rock.
Yes,
Oh
Chubb
my
Rock.
man, that needs to be the jump off today when I get to the gym. So yeah, there's so many songs that I could probably get really excited about. That would be one of the ones.
Okay.
Uh, I remember when my friend, I was a little bit old. I was in the older late 20s, and I had a friend, one of my best friends, who was like 10 years younger at the time, who was introducing me to everything that was coming along.
Okay.
So Treat Me Right was one of them. All the Big Daddy Kanes, the Biz Markie, the De La Soul. Good night. I can name a whole bunch, but yeah, I would say lately it's been the Rage Against the Machine,
Okay.
the metal rap versions are really great. And if you really want to listen to a great album, there's a movie, and I can't think of the name of it, where there was a rock groups and there are rap groups that came together. If you know what the name is,
Mhm.
you may not, but they came together and created some great stuff. There was this one group that collaborated with Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers
Okay.
and use "Free Falling" as the music.
I like
And
that
I want to
song.
say I think it was together with De La Soul. I'm not
Mm.
100% sure, but it was a really interesting way. But yeah, that was a fad back then. But I still kind of dig it because of the energy it brings.
Okay.
So
You
that's
see
me.
our friend
Yeah.
Sarah trolling. Marvin Sapp said never would have made it without sugar. She's talking about grits. She's the only she right.
That made my
Man.
day. As much as I disagree with that, that is that is wonderful.
I feel like I feel
I
like
love it.
I feel like the intro Marvin Sapp said never would have made it needs to be added to every lexicon to make a point. So congratulations, Sarah. We are adding that.
Yeah,
OG hip hop
absolutely.
respect. All right. And
Yeah,
then
absolutely.
whew, last question.
Mhm.
What is the best career advice you didn't take?
I was asked that for a press interview, and it kind of people actually have emailed me in response to it. Was the most responded to. I think it ended up in Fast Company or something like that. But I said the big one was to interview every year. I had a mentor who
Mm,
interviewed in my in those years, my informative years. When I speak informative, I mean from 25 to 55.
okay.
But all in all, was to interview every year. She interviewed every year as a way to keep up with what's going on. Also, just to kind of test what the market is. So no matter how good her jobs were, she stayed in the interviewing space. That's something I should have done is
Mm,
interview every year, and that way I can remain viable. I can remain
yeah.
marketable, but also know what's going out there and where I know to head. And I'm going to say that with the caveat is this: don't depend on companies for your career development. Invest your own money, because when you invest your own money, you get to dictate how that experience is going to be used. If a
Mhm.
company invests in it, then they get to dictate if you use it
Yes.
and how and where you get to use it because they paid for it.
Mhm.
So you should invest in your career, go find out what you need for that next position and go get it that year if possible. And I know we're talking about expense and all that, but there's a lot of alternatives these days to
Yeah.
where you can go to Coursera, you can catch Udemy and catch all these people and they're having specials to get the kind of training that you want to get or to get the extended training that you can get from other places where they provide certifications and where you have to have licenses.
Or
So,
share with your friends.
or share with your friends. But I would say get the experience so you can get the feedback yourself. I think
Oh,
your
no, no, I don't
training
mean the
is,
interviews. I mean, like, when if the cost of the
oh,
training is
okay.
too expensive, I'm
Got
saying share that cost,
Try to
not share
share, try
interviews.
to
No, no, no,
okay,
not share
gotcha.
interviews.
Or try to try or get secondhand information is what kind of what I was gearing towards. That you
Gotcha.
get that information for your friend, get the firsthand experience with your friends, but you can also share with your friends some of those courses and share some of those accounts, so that way you both can get it. But yeah, keeping it to yourself is one thing, but really you want to get the feedback from those courses
Okay.
as much as you possibly can, because that's where the sweet spot is just not doing the program but see how you're doing it and what it looks like to advance the skill.
Okay. All right. This was great. You dropped so many gems. I am going to have to go back and listen to this so that I can record them, write them down, and share them with the audience once again. I wrote as much
Cool.
down as I could, but I forgot a lot. But thank you
Sure.
again. I know I'll
Sure.
talk to you, but happy Thanksgiving.
Yes.
I'll be seeing you around the Twitter streets in the gossip chat rooms. Teasing.
Yeah. And and we can always talk whenever,
Yeah, yeah,
whatever, however it is.
absolutely,
Always really great. And I like to play a piece of this too on my upcoming shows here in
absolutely.
December. So cool. And I'll
Right.
point to your YouTube channel that you
That I
that
never
you
used.
ventured up.
That I never used.
But you should always have a YouTube channel.
Yes,
To do
sir.
what we do, you should have something where people can find your video because no telling what kind of opportunities it lead to you, even if it's just passive.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, sir. That sounds like you could have done that backstage, Mark. You could have done
I
that.
could
You could have done that
I could
backstage.
have I could have, but you have so much work that you could put there and
Oh,
highlight
you're
and
gonna keep
share.
doing this. I'm about to end this live. I'm about to end this live.
I'm
you
sorry. I'll be
you
quiet.
did trolling me. Oh, first Sarah, now you. Man. Okay. No, I do appreciate you. Thank you so much for jumping in on absolutely no notice. Because it has been a rough month. Yeah. End of October to now has just not been the best, but we're going to get there. Shout out to everyone again. Happy Thanksgiving. We'll be back with another episode of Trap Chat Live, and I do hope to see you there. Thank you.